As the Supreme Court decided it was acceptable to discriminate against trans people and the queer community as a whole, let us remind you that this discrimination has been ongoing, especially in the employment sector, and in hiring practices. Now, this report from March speaks to that. From CNBC, according to a new report from business.com, a business resource platform, over 80% of non-binary people believe that identifying as non-binary would hurt their job search. Similarly, 51% believe their gender identity has affected their workplace experience very or somewhat negatively. And I've got some more, but I want to pause here and say, I've worked in discrimination law in the past. When it comes to the main obstacle it comes to, we have protections in place that should prevent these types of discrimination from happening in our workplace. But a lot of people aren't educated as to their rights. And if they are, a lot of people don't have the resources to fight these battles in court because it's expensive. If you don't have access, if you don't live in a big city and you don't have access to something like, a nonprofit that has a legal department that can do these services for free, or a law school that has a clinic that will provide these services for free. A lot of people are SOL and they cannot fight this type of lawsuit. So they just end up the victims of discrimination with no legal recourse because it's just not feasible to them. So for anyone who's thinking, at least this is illegal, aside from the fact that it might not be in the very imminent future, it's really not possible for a lot of people to fight these types of battles. But CNBC continues and writes that business.com also went a step further by sending 2 identical phantom resumes to 180 unique job postings that were explicitly open to entry-level candidates in an effort to test whether or not the inclusion of gender-neutral pronouns impacts how employers perceive resumes. The phantom resume, including pronouns, received 8% less interest than the one without, and fewer interviews and phone screening invitations. According to the report, over 64% of the companies that received these resumes were equal opportunity employers, something that made the results even more worrisome. Now, the discrimination doesn't stop even if the employment is offered, even if the applicant gets a job and becomes an employee, it continues on as an employee. According to Gender GP research published by the Williams Institute, UCLA School of Law, on the experiences of LGBTQ plus workers in the US, highlights the persistent discrimination and harassment the community faces when simply trying to turn up and do their job. Key findings include that near half, 45.5% of LGBTQ plus workers reported experiencing discrimination and harassment at work, including being fired due to their gender or sexual identity. Data taken from the 2020 Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System found that 9% more cis adults were in the US workforce compared to trans adults. BRFSS data also reported that 42% more trans people work part-time, thus being less likely to accrue the same healthcare benefits as full-time workers. Trans and gender diverse people in employment make less money on average than cis people. And Mayor, we have this data. We know that this is a reality that many queer people are living. And instead of taking steps to actively protect, my community, the queer community, and to, remove barriers that are preventing them from having full gainful employment, states are instead, and the Supreme Court are holding hands and making it harder and putting more barriers in their path and making it easier for workplaces to discriminate against them.
Because this is America, the greatest country in the world, and you should be American and nothing else. You shouldn't have a gender. You shouldn't identify with your gender. I think here's what's truly disgusting. People won't even see the layered effect of discrimination on people in the LGBTQI plus community. Like the idea, one, that 80% of people have been affected or feel they've been discriminated against. And that's not even considered, like you said, what happens with the microaggressions when you get the job and what that does to your career, how it sets you back. Then you hear about the number of people that are working part-time versus full-time, knowing that we tie in this very great country, we tie your healthcare and your quality of life to what you make at a job. And that is absolutely disgusting. And we see why people are dying at a younger age, or people are committing suicide at higher rates when you have this. This is just in the work, not even just trying to live your life. To be LGBTQI plus in America is becoming a death sentence almost. And that is tragic on so many levels.
Exactly, and I think we can compare it to, and it's so often for some reason LGBTQ rights don't get cast in the same light as fighting for women's equality in the workplace or fighting to end racial discrimination in the workplace. I think it's because the right wing has very successfully rewritten the narrative that being gay, being LGBTQ is a choice, and they could simply choose not to and then exist in the workplace and not experience this discrimination, except for, of course, if they're a member of an intersectional identity, in which case then there's more hurdles. And I'm sure that if we broke this data down by Black members of the LGBTQ community, the harassment would be even higher. The rates of harassment would be even higher. Or when we look at women members of the LGBTQ community, and we saw that the number for trans people and non-binary people is particularly high. And it's just so disheartening because we've fought these battles, and so Republicans would love to stand there and take credit for the battles that they didn't fight, they pushed back against, and say racism is over. The Civil Rights Act was passed. The Supreme Court decided that you can't discriminate against gay people. So why are they even crying? They have marriage equality. What are they upset about? And Mayor, I think it really is just this ability to control the narrative and sort of rewrite what's going on in terms more favorable to them that has, I think it's really harmed the fight for equality for the LGBTQ community. I'll let you get the last word in on the story.
Yeah, I think this is why it's so important that we understand our history and where we find ourselves. Donald Trump didn't make the Republican Party in this image. He's just a loud proponent of what it is. But we know this dates back to 1972 with Richard Nixon and the Southern Strategy, and then the continuation with Ronald Reagan, who added in this so-called evangelical, the white evangelical, to this racist white Southern base. And I think this is the unholy union that continues to allow Republicans to win at all costs and all stakes across this country.